All right, everybody. Once again, welcome to We All We Got Book Club. I'm really excited because we have made it to the end of Boys Come First by Aaron Foley, and we actually have Aaron with us tonight. So we have a guest who happens to be the author of the book. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity just to be able to talk about this with you, Aaron, and with in the community here. So why don't we just start off by asking you, Aaron, how are you doing today? How you feeling? How's it going?
I am doing pretty well. I don't know how many people are in New York right now, but if you are in New York, you know how it's been like real hot all of a sudden these like last 2 or 3 days. So I've been
Uh,
trying to spend as much time outside as possible after like a long stretch of not being this warm. But
yeah.
no, I'm doing pretty good otherwise. So
Okay. Good. I think, yeah, I don't know, Carlito. I know you were in New York. I don't know if I saw you posting about the weather or something, but I think I saw some other people posting about the weather too. But okay, sounds good. But what we're going to do, once again, we're super excited. Thank you for being here with us tonight. We are going to start with some icebreaker questions, just very, very quickly for us to kind of get to know you just a little bit. Previously, before this book club, I had sent out a link to gather some questions, just in case someone had a question that they wanted to ask and they might not have made it. So, y'all, we have a long list of questions, but also I don't want this to just be an interview between me and Aaron. So what I'm going to do is ask a few icebreaker questions, kind of get us into the material, and then I'm going to open the floor for any questions, and then we'll just go back and forth between my personal questions, questions that were submitted, questions from the audience, and just kind of have a free-flowing conversation. So sounds good? All right. So Aaron, I have five icebreaker questions for you. Three of them are related to like writing, and then two of them are like more personal, right? Okay. So the first thing I want to know is, are you a morning writer or are you a night owl writer?
I am a whenever I have free time writer. So sometimes that's in the morning. More often than not, it's at night. But I don't subscribe to a particular routine. I know there are writers who are out there, and I don't put anybody down, don't get me wrong. But you have some people who say just like, oh, I wake up in the morning before the sun rises while it's still quiet, and I try to get some out there. And a lot of people think that is the only way to go. And I would just tell people it's just like whenever you have time. And so if that's the morning, that's fine. If it's
Okay.
not during the morning, that's also fine.
Okay. So I think I know what your answer for
Oh,
one
bye,
of your
Shawnee.
questions
I love you.
is.
So I want to. So
Yeah.
first, I want you to come next weekend since you have a car now.
All right. So the next question that I have for you, which I think I know what the answer might be, is do you prefer long writing sessions or short bursts of writing?
I actually prefer long. That's not to say that like things can't be done in a short writing session. Like, when I was writing this book, I was writing like I would just knock out like one long thing like at a time. But I was also, I mean, I had a full-time job. I still have a full-time job, but I'd be sneaking off at work sometimes, like in between tasks and write a little like thing here and there. And so, even if it's just like a sentence or two, it's still writing, right?
Yeah.
As long as if you have a goal in mind.
Mhm.
The amount of time it takes to reach that goal is dependent on the person, but even, the blocks of whatever it takes. It can be something small, it can be something big. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Do you prefer to write in silence or background music, a little, lo-fi going on?
I prefer silence. It can be difficult to find that balance. If you are, working in an office setting. I wrote a lot of this prior to the pandemic. The book came out in 2022. I sent it to the publisher in 2021, but the majority of what I was trying to do like came before like a lot of the hybrid or remote working situations came about. And so, 8 hours a day, I'm surrounded by people, and then go home and it's just like my mom's calling or something like that. And so we're dealing with a dude or one or two that maybe I should not have been dealing with at the time, but but finding those moments of silence were challenging, and but that is what I prefer. That's not to say that like there can't be beauty and art found in the chaos, but me personally, I need y'all to be like,
Yeah.
no, do not disturb.
You're like, okay. Well, I have two more icebreaker questions. These are a little bit more contentious, so I'm not asking these for us to tussle. I just want to find out where you're coming from with them. So, drums or flats?
I am Jobs. I need that. I need that sounds nasty. I'm like, I need the meat. Like I like it, it just feels more pleasing to me personally with drums. So drums.
Okay, so drums. All right. Cat or Eva?
Wait, what? What?
We talking about Beyond the Gates. So
Oh,
Cat
Cat or Eva. I'm
or
like,
Eva?
I am pro Eva. I am pro like I mean I like them. No, I don't. I mean I was gonna say I like them both equally. No, like I like Eva just because like she wasn't raised right. She needs to find herself and learn from her own mistakes and find her own path where she wasn't brainwashed by her mom, right? And so I like a good underdog. She's an underdog to me.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you for entertaining me with those icebreaker questions. I'm going to get us started with some of what I consider the low-hanging fruit just to get us started. And then I'll open up the questions. If any of you have already submitted your questions, feel free to ask Aaron yourself. I just wanted to make sure that we had as much as possible so that we can be prepared. But this first question is for personal, and I really want to know. So it's about Dominic. Well, well, oh, I'm recording, so maybe I shouldn't say this. I'm gonna find another one. But what I thought was pretty interesting was that you had a chapter that talked about Dominic and Rico, and my fake name is Dominic. So I was like, okay. But what I really want to know is that okay, Dominic is a top, right?
Mhm.
His name is Dom for short. So I
Mhm.
wanted to know, like when I think about Dominic, I think about Dom Top. And I wanted to know, was that intentional on your part?
It was a happy accident. And so
Okay.
the real story is I wasn't sure what to name each of the three main characters, Dominic, Remy, and Troy. And so um like what names I had settled on when I knew I wanted to write something, right? And so Dominic's name was originally Donald. I don't know why I was thinking Donald at the time. Maybe it was like, the five heartbeats. If anybody's ever seen that movie, I think Robert Townsend's character is like his nickname is Duck. And his real name is Donald. And so I was just like, oh, that's a dude's name, right? Um, I was literally I was in a meeting with one of my former coworkers. Her name is Alexis, right? And I was born in 1984. She is born in 1983. I just happened to have a screenshot or a screen grab from the TV show Dynasty of
Mm,
Diane Carroll as my lock screen.
mm,
Because we've all, I feel like a lot of us have seen that clip where she's
mhm,
eating the caviar with Alexis. She's like, "Oh,
mhm.
it's burned," and I
Yes. Oh,
and so I was kind of like
mhm,
obsessed with the some finding clips of that show, and I found this one. I was just like, "Oh, this is perfect for a lock screen, right?" And my coworkers saw it, and it clicked. I was like, "Alexis, that's her real name." I was like, what were you named after? And she was like, you know what? My mom was naming me after Alexis because she was watching Dynasty at the time. And then
that's
I
it.
went back to my own like elementary school and stuff like that. I grew up in Detroit. It's a majority Black city. You see a lot of Black girl names, but it was a lot of Black girls named Alexis. It was a lot of Black girls named Crystal, and it was a lot of Black girls named Dominique. I probably
Mhm.
had at various points in my elementary school like two or three girls named Dominique in one class all at once. And I noticed that we were all born at that same period of time when Dominique, the character, showed up on the show. And so I was
Yeah.
just like, wait a minute, what if I like made that into the male version of that? The male version of Dominique is Dominic, and like made his mom in the book like a fan of Dynasty, and that's where that came from. Now, once I started writing character, he's more of a top. I was like, oh, he's a dom top. Oh, okay. Well, let me put that in there. But that is the true story. That's how that happened. And
Okay.
and then Troy, and side note, Troy and Remy, to kind of keep it in terms of like keep it Detroit, keep it very authentic to, I'm not saying, we all grow up around Black people for the most part, but it's different. Detroit is different from DC, different from Atlanta, different from Florida, what have you. I just literally went with the names of other students across elementary school. So I'm just like, okay, there was a Troy, there was a Remy, there was like a Edward, Adam, all these kind of like
Yeah.
Brandon. Like if you weren't in the
Mhm.
80s, at least one Black boy named Brandon. That's one of my best
Mm.
friends' names.
So we got a Brandon or two in here.
Yeah, and so
Mhm.
I was like, okay, what are some Black boy names from that time period that would carry over now? And so that's where those
Mhm.
names came from.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, since we're already kind of talking about the characters, so we talked about the names, but I'm gonna like these are two questions that are kind of together. So I'm just gonna read it. What was your process of coming up with these characters and your inspiration behind them? And did you write the characters to reflect archetypes within the queer community, or were they based on people that you know, or just purely from your head?
It was, I would say maybe it's about a 70-30 mix of 70% people I've known and people I've known from the entirety of just existing, right? I had a very rare but privileged kind of upbringing where my mother was kind of open-minded about queerness and queer people. Now at the time in the early 90s, we did not have the language or the identity. We did not have the evolution in identity that we have now. But so I always preface this by saying I am not sure how these people quite identified. But
Mhm.
she did, my mom was a single mom, and sometimes she would have to pick me up from school, bring me back to her office, and she worked with a gay man and she worked with a trans woman. And so it was a male transitioning to female, right? And so seeing that and being exposed to that at such a young age, and for throughout the time that she worked there, I've kind of seen versions of queerness my entire life. And so I was kind of drawing from that. I was drawing from my own experiences. I was drawing from the experiences of the several Black queer people I have met like throughout my entire lifetime at every stage. So there's not like one or two or three people that each individual and their partners are
Mhm.
based on. But I one thing I did notice with, especially within my own peer group, within my own age group and stuff like that, was that we were kind of going through a lot of the similar struggles when it came to dating, when it came through advancing through the workplace and things like that. And so I noticed some overlap between like, I'm seeing somebody, they don't know how to commit, they don't know how to do this. Why is it like, I gotta go through his phone and da 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 da. Um, there was a lot of similarities. There weren't, nobody's on the same parallel linear path. But when I'm having these conversations at brunch and in the group chat, it's like we're all kind of hitting some of these different milestones at some point or another. So yeah, it's a little bit of everybody. 30% of it was kind of, exaggerated versions
Yeah.
of specific experiences. If
Okay.
you read the end of the book, it's like a dude that Remy is like going through a dude's phone and he jumps out the hotel room and catches a flight. That has never happened to me or anyone I know, but I can see somebody going to that extremes, for example.
Right. I thought Rem, you went all the way to Palm Springs. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I have like one more question before we kind of open it up as an open forum. Um, this one is also kind of like a two-part, but want to know like what was your inspiration for writing the book? Like what inspired you to write it? And then did you always envision it as like what it is now, like as a novel, or did it just start out like as an idea, short story, a screenplay?
I have always, so when my mother was a journalist, right? And so I sort of came into this world watching my mother always behind a typewriter at the time. Typewriter becomes a word processor becomes a desktop, becomes a laptop, so on and so forth. So I was always watching her just like write real stories about real people. And to keep me busy, she gave me a typewriter and I really liked a couple of things when I was little. I liked fairy tales, I liked books and things like that. I was always the kid who loved going to the bookstore. My grandmother used to take me to the bookstore and we would just sit and read and read and read. Um, I know we got some Beyond the Gates fans up in here, but I was the kid who every summer, me and my grandmother would be watching The Young and the Restless and stuff like that. And so that is a tradition that I still hold on to this day. But what I love, what this young gay boy loved about the soap operas was the drama, the plot twist and stuff like that. And so I was always just kind of in that mindset of just like, let me create something like that. I knew I always wanted to be a writer. What kind of writer I had to kind of figure out towards, when things started getting real, like going to college and stuff like that. And so I was always involved in journalism and stuff like that in high school. And so I got a journalism degree. I'm still a journalist. I've been in this career in this industry for a long time, but there was always the inkling of like, I need to write fiction. I've always wanted to do this. And so it kind of became like a hobby, side hustle type of thing that became a book. Now, when I first had the idea to write something, I had gone to what was it? My 10-year high school reunion. And I was looking at all the cliques and all the friend groups that were super strong when we were in high school and then had broken apart by the time we had become adults. And I was just like, that's a good idea for a novel. Looking at and looking at Detroit specifically where I'm from, the way Detroit had changed in this past 10 years from high school till now. And I had three female characters at the center, three female characters who had been in a fictitious clique and then life had taken them in 10 3 different directions by the time they got to be adults. And a dude I was dating at the time, we're still friends, I was telling him about this idea and he was just like, no, you can't write about women, you're not a black woman, you're not a female, you can't do this. I'm like, why not? People have done it for years. And he's just like, no, you don't want to do that, not in this climate, right? Why don't you do it about our community? Why don't you do it about black gay men? And then I had a different friend who I was kind of verbalizing this idea to. Me and him have known each other. He's also a black gay man. Me and him, we've known each other since kindergarten and first grade. Our moms were both single moms. Our moms came up in the time of Waiting to Exhale, where they were the age group of that book and subsequent movie. And all of the other black women they knew, especially all the single ones, were carrying around the book in their purse and stuff like that. And then I was telling this same particular dude, I was like, the stuff that our moms were going through 20, 25 years ago with dating and trying to find a stable relationship and so on and so forth, things have not changed except with us. It's it's like a gay version of that, right? And so that kind of hit on me. I was just like, oh, I've always loved that movie. I've always loved that book. What if there was a gay version of that? And so that's how it happened in terms of like I felt like I just wanted to kind of tell this kind of particular story. So
Look where we are now. We got book club talking about it. We love to see it. All right. Well, I'm going to open up the floor now for questions. We can do the raise hand order of things. So I'll call on you. As I mentioned, some of you have already submitted questions, so we can go from there. But I will call on you. So let's start with Sean.
All right, y'all. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm in commutes right now, per usual, but I really wanted to attend. Aaron, your book was fantastic. And so my one question before I might have to pop off is, we all have such differing opinions of these characters, kind of like highs and lows, goods, bads. So I was just curious, like, did you want us to draw your audience? Do you have anything in mind about what you wanted us to conclude about these characters? So for example, with Remy, it was like so much of the conversation was, is he selling out his community? Is it something that is fair for him to do? So I was just curious if you had any thoughts in mind about what you wanted your audience to conclude about these particular characters, or did you just want us to kind of see them as flawed human beings like everyone? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wanted everyone to see that these characters are flawed, but that there is room for these particular characters to be flawed. I think with Black queer representation, we kind of want a very, I won't say we, like every single person, right? But I think there is kind of that expectation of, because the odds are against us in so many ways. We have to navigate the world as Black people. We have to navigate the world as queer people. When we are Black and queer at the same time, that intersectionality, we have to navigate the world in such a way that, like, there is no room to make mistakes. But at the same time, we're human, we're flawed. We're predispositions to kind of mess up and stumble sometimes. And, is that okay? Right? Is it okay if, like, one character does kind of fall into like a substance abuse type of thing? Is it okay if one person just kind of like, can't see the forest for the trees when it comes to a person that like can't commit or something like that? And so I think, writing or looking at characters who never make mistakes, who never do anything wrong. I mean, that would be kind of like, okay, how that story is going to end. I wanted people to take away that's just like, there, the part of the book that I kind of like, that I was trying to hit home, was like the part where Dominic is kind of in this in his feelings a little bit. I think he's in his mom's room kind of thinking about his choices and whatnot. And I put into words like, there isn't a guidebook, there isn't a playbook on how to live this life. There's multiple representations of how a cisgender heterosexual Black male can go through life. There's plenty of representations of a cisgender Black female and how to live their life. There isn't like a waiting to exhale or any of these types of things for a Black gay man. And so uh where that kind of leaves a lot of room for interpretation, for mistakes, for joys, for highs, for lows, for downs, ups and downs, and all that sort of thing. So I wanted people to take away from that in terms of, these characters are human. They will mess up. They will have positives in their life. They will have negatives. But at the end of the day, it's just like, let's not hold their identities against them and what we expect from them, and forget that they are also human at the same time. So.
Yeah, that was a great question, great answer. And I personally feel like you did a very good job at producing very nuanced characters, because it's like you want to root for them, but you pissing me off, and I get it, but you aggravate it, and it's just like that. That's real. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's kind of,
Uh,
not to cut you off, Rico, but it's kind of like Eva on Beyond the Gates. It's like, damn, girl, it's like I'm trying to root for you, but you can't.
yes, yes, we love a nuanced character.
Yes.
Um, Queen Mother, Nye, you're up.
The godmother of questions.
Yes.
Oh, lovely to meet you. Your book was very amazing. Like this is the first book I read where I felt something, and it was fantastic. So I have to give you your tens, but I wanted to know what was the hardest chapter for you to write?
The hardest chapter for me to write. Um, Honestly, I would have to say, because it did kind of mirror a real life situation I had gone through. What's the point where Remy was in the one of Remy's last chapters, where it's just like he's kind of accepting the fact that like this dude that was long distance away from him was like not the one. And I had gone through that. I didn't go through the whole like flying to a different part of the country, part of it and going through the dude's phone and stuff like that. But it was a very hard realization that I had been played. That that a dude was kind of stringing me along and I was delusional. Didn't quite have the tools to kind of see all these types of things. And Remy is kind of going through this thing where it's just like, I worked so hard to kind of avoid a situation like this. And that was the kind of thing I had to go through. And so that was a very personal part of me that kind of came through in the book. The other part was, I won't say it was personal to me, but I was worried about how people would receive it, if that makes sense. And that was kind of writing about with Troy and his kind of dibbling and dabbling with the substances and stuff like that. Now
Mhm.
Troy does a couple of things that I have not done. And to be clear, I do not project any judgment one way or another on that sort of thing. But I was kind of worried in terms of like because I have known people that have either full on either experimented or have had like legitimate like issues with it and whatnot. I was worried about like that reception of it from people who pick it up and think like, well, damn, all y'all like this and da 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 da. And so that part of me was a little bit like challenging to write just because I was like at the time when I was writing it, I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be that person that sends the wrong message about our particular community and stuff like that. And so I had to get over that really quickly because like I said, I knew people who have done it to some degree or another. I was like, well, if it happens in real life, it's okay to talk about it in fiction. So like let's just go for it. So
Hey, sounds good. As a follow-up to that, I'd like to know what was like the easiest part or the part that gave you the most joy.
um I think the easiest part was writing about Detroit because that's where I'm from. And so like I've lived in New York for 5 years, but prior to that I've lived in Detroit my entire life. And it's just a city that I can just talk nonstop about. And so I always tell people like do not get me going down the rabbit hole because I won't stop. And so Detroit is a city that does not get a lot of play in fiction. If you think about some of the major works of African American fiction or queer fiction, it's a lot of coastal cities. It is New York, it is Los Angeles. If you think about like the epicenters of Black queerness, Atlanta, I love Atlanta. Shout out to the ATL, all of that. DC Pride. Everybody was talking about DC Pride and a certain incident that may or may not have happened this year and stuff like that. But like, Detroit is one of the blackest, Detroit is the blackest city in the United States by density. It is the home of not just Motown, but everything that spun off of Motown, the archetypes of how a girl group should operate. We talk about like the Articulettes and the girl going solo, and I'm just like, okay, that's the Supremes, right? And so, it's Anita Baker, it's Aaliyah, it's all these types of things that I grew up around. And so that just came second nature to me in terms of like writing about my hometown. The other part that was just kind of fun to write about was just the friendship dynamic between the three boys. I cherish friendship like no other. But I realized as I was getting older and whatnot, some of the oldest friends I have had are my fellow Black queer friends, right? And so you look at like a lot of the friendship representations, there's Sex in the City, there's Girlfriends, there's Living Single, there's a lot of like heterosexual, cisgender representations of queerness, I mean, of friendship. And yes, we do have Noah's Ark. Yes, we do have Noah's Ark. It is a legendary, groundbreaking show. But I kind of wanted to speak to something that was kind of unique to us in my age group and stuff like that. And so that part just kind of came second nature as well.
Hey, all right, thanks for that. Bird, you have the floor.
Hey, Aaron, I'm Bird. My question, since you were speaking about Detroit, to me, I've said my whole entire time reading this book that Detroit was one of the main characters in the book. Was that something that you intentionally meant to do with Detroit? Like, how did Detroit play a role in the creation of the story? And can you tell us more about like the gentrification process and how that affected your writing point of view?
Yeah, absolutely, because Detroit is a city that like if you grow up there, you do kind of grow up delusional in Detroit. It's just like nobody. It's like it's like our families and our cousins. Just like nobody can say anything bad. Like I can say something bad about it, but nobody outside the
Yeah.
family can say something bad about it, right? But Detroit is a city that has gotten such a negative reputation in the last couple of years. It's the butt of so many jokes. We get like, you're not supposed to go there at night. Don't mess around with these people at a certain time of day, so on and so forth. And yes, it's not entirely false. It is a city that does have a lot of violence. It is a city that has struggled with a lot of things, but I also think of like how many of these things were systemic. When you do have a city that has been disinvested in economically, so on and so forth. When you have a city that has borne the brunt of several epidemics, the crack epidemic for one, and stuff like that, well, it's just like that didn't come out of nowhere, right? And so, um, I think of how, what duty do I have as a Detroiter to kind of, correct some of that narrative and let people know that like this is a city that has again produce so much talent, produce so much good in the world, whether you see it or not, or so much influence that, whether you're aware of it or not, that more people should know about. And so, yeah, I was kind of intentional about making sure that people knew, as much about Detroit as they did know about like some of this particular Black queer story. And then what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry. Where did that get it all?
That covered a great deal of it. I was asking about just like the gentrification, but I think that's what you were
Oh.
saying about being a responsible Detroit citizen. So I think you covered it.
I mean, when it comes to gentrification, it is a thing that like, and I live in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, right? Like, I can walk outside the brownstone right now and see gentrification, right, in real time. But when it comes to gentrification in Detroit, it is a thing that is happening in terms of you do see a lot of places, not just I think gentrification takes on different forms in different cities. It's not going to look the same every single place. But in Detroit, you do see a lot of places where you not only see non-Black people coming into non-Black spaces, but also kind of making things unaffordable for the Black people that still remain. Where it comes into conflict is with Remy's character in terms of like he is Black, he grew up in Detroit, he knows the struggle. Now he is trying to overcome the struggle, but at the time when he's trying to overcome the struggle is at the same time when this gentrification is happening. It's just like how do you maintain that momentum of like I got to get this money, I got to be on this certain kind of track, when it kind of means like having to compromise a little bit of that. And I've seen a lot of people, gay, straight, male, female, whatever, that I came up with that have had that internal, sometimes external struggle of just like, oh, I really want Detroit to improve. I do want the city to do better. I do want to kind of like push the city past the narrative that we grew up around. But it does kind of come at that cost of like, I got to be in a white man's pocket to kind of do this. And so that push and pull is what I see a lot of folks going through right now.
Okay, makes sense. And let me just say, Aaron, you better go hard for your city. I know that's right. All right, Christian.
All right, hey Aaron.
My friend on TikTok.
Yes, I've been on TikTok. I've been on TikTok spreading the word about this book. I love it. So I love the book. It's my favorite book I read so far this year. But My question was, so Dom, like I think in like the first chapter, like he establishes like he has this I guess like he wanted to have like certain things done by a certain age. He had that kind of pressure on himself. So I was wondering like do you have that in kind of experience in your own life? Like, did you have a goal of writing a certain amount of books by a certain amount of age, like being on New York Times bestseller list or anything like that?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Like I just turned 40 last year, and so I'm way past 35 when Dominic was trying to do X, Y, and Z. When I so but a lot of that like timeline that like you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. Um, a lot of that was just trying to verbalize and put into words a lot of what I grew up around, not just my experience, but a lot of the experience of my peers. There was kind of like, my parents got married when they were 22 and 23, right? And so it's just like I'm already, a lot of us already like are feeling like, well, I'm 25 when I'm married. I'm 26
Right.
when I'm married. And it's just like by this time, like my parents had already done this, and that. Um, Growing up in Detroit, it wasn't just me, but like a lot of folks, like, we grew up in places where we were not the first ones in our family to go to college and stuff like that. Like my grandfather had a PhD, so he had a doctorate. I grew up around a lot of people who's like, had multiple degrees in their house and stuff like that. And some of that kind of reflected in their career choices, what kind of houses they bought and stuff like that. So kind of that pressure to kind of just like achieve, achieve, achieve. I went to a gifted and talented high school. There was always kind of that looming like you have to be on this level of the GPA and stuff like that and go to this kind of college and this kind of thing. It's just like you just can't go to any HBCU. You got to go to the HBCU. You can't just go to any college. You got to go to Ivy League and stuff like that. That kind of thing kind of stuck with me for a lot. I also kind of looked at just kind of how Black queerness intersected with white queerness, right? And so a lot of the representations of white queerness was just like two white dudes that look just alike, living in like a Manhattan or something like that, and going to Fire Island 3 times a year and all that type of stuff, and flying on all these flights and having these like perfect Instagram lives and stuff like that. How sometimes inadvertently our community can kind of subscribe to kind of those notions, and Dominic himself kind of fell into that, like living in New York, working in an industry that's mostly white and stuff like that. And so I was trying to put a lot of that in there too, in terms of like what are the achievements that folks that sometimes Black communities can put on themselves, and what are the achievements that sometimes like white queer communities can put on themselves. As for me personally, I still struggle with it, to be perfectly honest, in terms of like being on my own journey and realizing what's for me is for me, and when the time comes, it will come. But sometimes, every once in a while, I'll look at somebody, Black, gay, straight, or whatever, in my kind of age group or somewhere on the same level that I am, and they do something that I haven't done yet, and I'm just like, damn, I haven't done that yet. And then I gotta get back, and it's like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, I've done this, I'm fine, I'm done.
Right.
It's good. It's good.
That's good. I think we all struggle with that. That's good.
That's very true. That's something I was dealing with. Like we're all our own worst critics. I'm like, I'm not doing enough. And everybody's like, what do you mean? You need to actually sit your ass down. So I get that. Any other questions for Aaron right now? Aaron, I have another kind of like a two-parter for you. I want to know, like, how do you feel about the boys come first, still having its own life? Because it's been years at this point, and it's like there's new breath that's still being fed into it. So I want to know, how do you feel about it continuing to like progress? And then the second part, I can repeat this, but I want to know, has there been any like particular feedback or reception that has like surprised you or moved you the most through this time period?
Um, Answer the yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll answer the first part, of course.
Okay.
Um, uh, I mean, I'm just like grateful, and blessed that like the book kind of keeps finding new readers. I am very, very appreciative of everybody. I try to respond to everybody. Sometimes I'll send like a nice little like thank you for reading and stuff like that. But if I like it or if I retweet it, that is my appreciation, right? Um, on one hand it is very like and it's not just me. In 2022 there were quite a few Black queer authors who all kind of either were releasing their debuts or something new around the same time, and so like me and Rashid Newson, who released My Government Means to Kill Me, a historical Black gay novel set in the 80s. His book came out like right after mine. And then we both got to know each other because Shalani Aladdin had done the audiobook for both of ours. And so we kind of had this like little circle going for a little bit. But both me and Rashid both noticed just like, oh, people were picking up mine and people were picking up his. And then like we had people like complimenting both of us at the same time, even though like structurally and the types of storytelling that we both did were kind of two different things. Like I was more like leaning towards more like book club commercial type stuff, and Rashid was more historical literary, but we both had that tie in terms of like we were centering a Black queer story, right? And so his book has continued to live on. Several other authors have continued to live on. I think about like how people continually discover Elin Harris, and he has been passed on for about not quite 20 years yet, but like people still find Invisible Life and Just As I Am and things like that. The Noah's Ark rewatch that Rico, you had led the way on that, and now Noah's Ark has its continuation coming out in just a couple of weeks. Noah's Ark came out when I was in college, right? And so like and I'm well out of college by this point, but just kind of creating something, whether it lasts for 3 years, whether it lasts for one, or in some of these cases that I mentioned, going on 20 and 30 at this point. It's always just like it's indescribable to kind of see something continue for that long. And I know that every creator is super appreciative of it. That said, um, when it comes to where I want to go, I'm feeling the pressure, like to kind of not, I won't say pressure, but like I know that there is more I would like to say. There are more stories I want to tell. And so I have been trying to emphasis on trying to create a follow-up. I have a whole spreadsheet of titles and ideas and plots I would like to write. What's slowing me down is, to be honest, like I have a job. I have work to do. I have things to tend to. My parents are getting older, and things like that. And so I find myself the times I would like to write those early morning sessions or those, after things get quiet. Um, I don't have as much of those as I had when I was doing this book because I am kind of tending to like, oh, got to do a meeting, got to do this, got to do that, got to set some time for some self-care and stuff like that. And then as soon as self-care is over, one of my nieces needs this, or one of my little younger brothers needs that, or something like that. And so, um, I don't want to kind of let Boys Come First be my only contribution to the many, many, many different aspects and facets of Black queerness that still need to be exhumed and examined and things like that. So, what was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
No, well, first of all, I want to say life be life, man. So we
Yeah.
we definitely get it. But I like something that you said earlier, where there's just like whenever you got some time, or even if it's a sentence or two. So I appreciate the dedication to it, and I think that's more important than like, oh, I got to follow up with the book tomorrow. You know what I mean? But the second part of the question was there any particular reception or feedback or that really surprised you or moved you the most?
I have this picture of it. Maybe I'll post it to my Blue Sky account because I feel like that's where we all live, right? Um,
Mhm.
but uh, but I went back home to Detroit, and then there's a book club out there that invited me to come speak, and they were based in Grosse Pointe. If you know anything about Detroit, Detroit is a majority Black city, and we have all these suburbs, of course, like any city does. And then you have a number of cities called Grosse Pointe Park, Grosse Pointe Shores, Grosse Pointe Farms, and then this particular cluster of suburbs are very white, very wealthy, and just a very kind of particular kind of Michigan Midwest kind of white woman uh, uh, aesthetic, right? And they wanted me to come read this Black queer book because, like I think I said earlier, Detroit in fiction and literature is hard to come by, and so I found myself virtually and in person reading to a lot of places or in and around Detroit just because they wanted a book that looked something like where they were from. But I was blown away because like I read excerpts of this book in front of a group of white women. You know, we're talking average age of like 45 or 55. And I took a picture with them, and like it's literally me and a whole bunch of like 45 and up white women, right? So I'll post that picture, but it blew me away because like they appreciated like some of the storytelling and they appreciated like some of the Detroitness of it and they just went with it. They were asking the same questions that you all were asking, like why did Remy do this? Why did Dominic do this? And you know, when you write a book, it's expected that, you know, somebody unlike the main character, just somebody unlike the author themselves is going to read that. I knew that going in. I was not expecting white women from this suburb where like you know, when I was growing up, they told Black people not to drive down some of these streets at night because you will get picked up.
Wow.
Now I'm in their neighborhood, right? The fun
Yeah.
the funniest thing was not to dwell too long on it, but there was a lesbian. There were two white lesbians there as part of the book club. They were not together, but one of them was just like, "Do you remember the name of so and so?" And I was just like, "No." And she was like, she taught your gym class in elementary school." And I was like, that old white, well, she was young at the time. I was like, that white butch lesbian that was my gym teacher in first grade is her wife. And yeah, that's how small Detroit is. It's just like this lady I've not literally not seen in 30 years. Her wife is at my book club. And so that blew me away.
We love that. Come on, Impact. All right, so I'm in Eastern Standard Time. We're coming up on 7 p.m. Just wanted you all to know Aaron has agreed to go beyond 7, maybe until like 7:30. We usually schedule an hour, but an additional 30 minutes for more conversation if that needs to be. So if anybody needs to drop off, feel free to do so, but we can continue until 7:30 to, have some more conversation. I did see Nye had her hand up. Just want to double check if you still had a question before I go to Carlito.
No, I wanted to ask him what did he hope readers would get from first time readers? What does he hope readers would get from reading Boys Come First?
Yeah, especially the straight readers too. I know readers in general, but those
Yeah,
that
like
do not
straight,
identify as queer.
the allies.
Mhm.
For people who do not identify as queer, I would hope that again they kind of see Black queerness as complex but also just very human. Um, a lot of fiction just kind of fixates on a lot of like, there's room. There's always been room in stories about like, white straight people making mistakes, doing whatever they want to do, and things like that. I wanted something that kind of allow Black queer people to kind of have those same mistakes. I also wanted something that like didn't dwell too much on struggle, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that struggle doesn't happen and things like that, but I didn't, one of the things I always go back to is like I look at the parents of all of the main characters, right? We don't see Remy's mother, but it says in the beginning that like Remy, did well enough to buy his mom a little space downtown, which is in a real building, for her to live in and stuff like that. You see the back and forth between Dominic and his mother. You see the back and forth between Troy and his father and stuff like that. There aren't any parents who are homophobic, right? It's just like Dominic's mother accepts him for who he is. Troy's father is more disappointed in his life choices than his romantic choices and things like that. And so I didn't, this is not to say that homophobia in Black households does not exist, but I went back to like how many stories we've seen where a character has to overcome this. Oh, and by the way, his parents also disown him or disown them just because. And so I related that to some of the experiences that I had, that my peers had in terms of like the coming out process and things like that, and how our parents was just like, I always knew. I was just waiting on you to tell me, which is exactly what my parents said. But, I was trying to craft something that like came after the coming out, that came after the like like we're here now, how are we living, and then our parents are telling us it's just like, ooh, I don't like the that job you have, or I don't like this, I never, Dominic's mother being like, I never liked him to begin with, and that sort of thing. And so that's one thing I wanted people to take away in terms of like, our stories don't always have to be defined by a particular kind of narrative. Again, want to emphasize and reiterate that does not say that that narrative doesn't completely not exist, but I wanted to tell like a different kind of story. So
Mhm. And Aaron, I personally want to say thank you for that, because that's something that I'm trying to navigate having a book club, especially, reading queer literature. A lot of it can tend to lean itself to heaviness, right? And so I'm like, I don't want every time we choose a book and then we're talking about like trauma and all of these things. So that was why this book was so important for us to have, coming off of a pretty heavy book, to have just kind of like a lighter discussion going into the summer. Yeah, some of the topics are still heavy, but I do appreciate it because sometimes we love Black Boy Joy. We want to explore those different stories. So thank you for doing that, and for making sure you differentiated that distinction. But all right, Carlito, it's on you.
Hello. My question is that you and I actually had a very lovely chat via Twitter when I had reposted that A, I was reading the book, but then also B, I saw a I guess you would say like a news article saying that there's a possibility that this will become a series. And my question to you is two-parter, sorry. One, prior to that conversation, has there been any activity on it? Because I know when we were speaking, we were talking about, that's step one, but then there's so many other things that happen after that, how that could be a challenge, especially when it comes to media that is catering towards not only Black people, but Black queer people, one. And then also two, did you ever intend for this to possibly be a series? And if so, do you have anyone in mind to play the three boys?
And let me drink my wine while
Or any supporting characters.
Okay, so let me answer the second to last part of that.
Okay.
When I wrote this, no, I did not have any intention of it even being considered for a TV series, right? I'm a person that I have spent my life with words, right? The written word, the printed word. I'm a career journalist. And so my intention is to write something down and deliver it in that format, right? I like writing. I like putting things to words, right? And so I do know that there are authors who have ambitions to kind of like go into screenwriting, have their things adapted and stuff like that. I wanted to tell a Detroit story. I wanted to tell a Black story. I wanted to tell a Black queer story. That was it, right? However, whatever medium it happens to be accepted in, I wanted my medium to be a book, right? And so TV, not even thinking about it. So when it came to the adaptation, I was like, oh, well, that's nice. um it happened around 3 years ago, right after the book came out. It just so happened that my literary agency was also kind of like under this umbrella of an agency that also represented like producers and screenwriters and things like that. And so what had happened was they started shopping around the manuscript around their own internal circles, and it landed at a production company that had the deal with Amazon around the same time. Chuck Hayward, who keep that name in mind, Chuck Hayward was coming off of an Emmy nomination because he had worked at WandaVision, he had worked at Ted Lasso and a couple of other places, and his profile was raising a little bit as one of the few Black queer screenwriters to kind of get an Emmy nomination, period. He was looking for his own project. Our roads sort of converged. The two of us got together. We landed with the production company Field Trip, who had a first look deal with Amazon. The strike happened. The TV writer strike happened, and we all got an individual letter from Amazon being like, it's okay, it's okay. Whatever deal was signed prior to the strike, we're going to revisit it after the strike. The strike ended. Amazon had some their own turnover with executives and whatnot. So Chuck had written a script. I had given notes and input and stuff like that, making tweaks, making sure that the characters, we had this whole script written. My job at that point was just like, okay, a person from Detroit would not say this. A person from Detroit would not say that and things like that. So I had my red pen out and I was just like, nope, 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 nope. Change this, change this, change this. We had submitted three different scripts to like two different sets of executives, and they kept saying, no, fix this, no, fix that. We were getting the message that they were saying that this show is perfectly gay, but it's a little bit too Black. And so can you tone down the Black aspects of this? And so Chuck had turned in a script that he wasn't quite happy with, that he was just like, you could exchange these characters for any white characters, and it would still work, but this is what they're asking for, right? Once we kind of got the Amazon didn't exactly say no, but they were kind of leading us a path down where they were going to say no. And we were just like, let's see if we can pull out of this deal with Amazon early so we could take some meetings with some other networks and stuff like that. Because as Chuck's profile kept going up, he was taking meetings with other networks and things like that. And he was like, well, this network is interested, this production company might be interested, but they would have to buy us out of Amazon, which is a whole bunch of red tape and stuff like that. Um, the thing that kind of broke the straw, like Netflix movie, the straw that kind of broke the thing was, it wasn't Amazon that ultimately passed. It was the production company Field Trip, which is, I don't really talk about it as much because I don't feel like it's my place. But Field Trip actually lost its deal with Amazon. They had the show A League of Their Own, which they tried to reposition to kind of look more at the queer aspect of the original movie. And they had a lot of clashing with Amazon at that point. And so, but they were the ones that had picked up the option with Voice Come First and another book along the way. Because they kind of had this like falling out with Amazon, that left me and Chuck kind of in the dust. And then after they had a falling out with Amazon, Field Trip completely dissolved completely. They ceased operations. They stopped talking to us completely. They stopped talking to everyone. And so me and Chuck were just kind of left in the dust. And so the past couple of months, Chuck and I were just like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Chuck was like, I still have this script. I still have all these people I'm meeting with. We just need Amazon to kind of undo their part of this deal, and then we can take it out. Uh, that only literally just happened about a month and a half ago. Chuck gave me a phone call. I was out and about with my friends at a gay bar somewhere. And Chuck called me. He was just like, I just got word from Amazon that we're free and clear to start shopping this project out. And so we kind of have the whole 3 years that it took to kind of get us to this point, like we have to start that process over again. The reason why I'm sort of hopeful that it can still happen is because I know that like Chuck sold his own pilot, like he still has to keep working as a screenwriter, right? And so he sold a different pilot to a different network about a completely different subject. And he's trying to build his own thing. He's trying to build his own thing where it's just like, okay, I have the clout. I'm building the clout that I have. And he really believes in making sure that this Black queer story gets told some way, somehow. I look at like the number of years it took for Noah's Ark to kind of get to this point where they're just now getting the follow-up with this movie, that Patrick Ian Polk had talked about at least, 4 or 5 years ago, right? He was talking about, oh, this is going to be on MTV, this is going to be on this, it's going to be on that. And it finally lands. And so I feel like there is, I don't want to be, I recognize the landscape for streaming and networks and things like that. Every time you look up a different show with an all Black cast is being canceled. But then I kind of look at the positive. What's the show that we are watching right now is we are watching, day to day on CBS and or Paramount Plus. I'm a Paramount Plus viewer. I'm watching Beyond the Gates every day, and it's just like all these Black folks are messy. Yes, I know the sole Black queer male character is with a white dude, but it's just like that's a story that like I've seen more of Martin and Smitty than I have like episode count than like more than Noah's Ark, more than some of these other places. So it's just like there is a glimmer of hope that something like this can happen. Who I want to be in it, I like Jelani a lot. Me and him have been texting like for 3 years now, while he's trying to get his own career going. Jelani was instrumental in getting the audiobook off the ground. His stuff started popping off when he did Fellow Travelers. He's always expressed interest. I think I mentioned at some point that like, I dropped a hint. I was just like, Troy, his character is half Black, half South Asian. Jelani is Guyanese Indian, right? And so a lot of people don't know that, but like his ancestry is a mix of African and South Asian himself. And then his folks found their way to Guyana, and then his folks found his way from Guyana to Brooklyn. And so he's got the makeup that would reflect one of the characters. So if he doesn't end up in it somehow, like he's always been at the top of my list regardless. I like Jeremy Pope. I like Jonathan, can I call his name? But he was in Harlem. Someone like Gerard Carmichael, like who kind of has this like dry humor about him. what kind of thing could he bring to this project? What's his name? Jermel Simon from the Upshaws. Uh, very handsome, very attractive, but him and his partner, whose name I can't call at the moment, could they be involved in something like that? My ultimate dream casting, and I'll end it with this because I know I've been talking for a long time. Um, I looked at the character of Remy, and I looked at someone who's just kind of like very confident, very like just um just can kind of walk into a room and command everything and stuff like that. But also is very emotional, puts things on display. I see Duran Bernard playing him. I love Duran's music. The book is set in Detroit. Duran is from Cleveland. Cleveland and Detroit are very like kind of close in a way, and so there's that Black Midwestern aspect to it. But I think about like the number of singers like Queen Latifah who came from a music background and went into living single and stuff like that. I'm just like, if I could pick like one musician to kind of follow that track, it would be Duran. So, and I know I'm missing
So,
quite a few people.
so just so I'm clear, you're saying Durand as Remy?
Yes.
Now I'm gonna have to reread it. I'll have to reread the book. Okay. Well, Ricky mentioned in the chat that sorry that all this has happened to you, and I echo those same sentiments because I know that had to be frustrating. But I'm glad that there's still hope and still opportunity, and we just gonna just keep showing up every day and see what comes of it. All right. So if there's anyone that has any more questions, feel free to raise your hand. If not, I have two more questions for you, Aaron, as we're getting ready to wrap up. So this is just a question for clarification. When you say you have a follow-up to Boys Come First, do you mean a sequel to Boys Come First, or do you mean a separate follow-up project that is separate?
That's where I am like torn because I have like two things in progress right now. One would be a follow-up directly to Boys Come First. The other is like a completely separate idea. Um, if I were to do a follow-up to Boys Come First, I wouldn't do a direct sequel where it follows all three. I would just follow one of them. And honestly, I would follow Remy. I feel like I mean if I had all the time in the world, I would do like one book with Remy, one book with Dominic, one book with Troy, and I'm not ruling that out. But I had a story kind of come to me that kind of followed Remy's path a little bit more. I feel like he had more story to be told. And yeah, I would include like Dominic and Troy and some of the other folks along the way. But like I thought about like how Remy, it's mentioned that his father is in prison. He has this burgeoning relationship with Terrell towards the end, and the city of Detroit just keeps changing over and over and over again. And I just, I see potential there for like a kind of a Remy centric follow up. The other, I mean, I have like three other ideas, and I started making headway on another one, but I'm kind of leaning towards like the not quite sequel, but a continuation of one of the three. If I can just kind of plug real quick, there's an anthology coming out, a fiction anthology called You've Got a Place Here Too. It comes out in August, and it's a collection of authors, including like Casey Lehman, uh, Ebony Liddell, Donnie Walton, who did the final revival of Open and Neve. There's a couple Kennedy Ryan is in there too. There's a couple of Black writers who all got together to do love stories set at HBCUs, and I have an entry in there. And it comes out in August. And so I think it's my pinned I know it's my pinned tweet. I can't remember if I pinned it on Blue Sky, but I do have more fiction coming out in the form of a short story as part of a larger collection of authors, and I'm really excited about that. But I'm trying, that's like the EP, until I get to the album.
Yeah.
Right? So
No, but we love a good EP.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm not trying to do a miseducation. It's just like, all right, all right. I don't want to be living off of this for
I
the
know, I get it. I completely get it. Okay, I know I said I had two questions, but as you were talking, it made me think about one other question that multiple people had submitted that we want to find out. Before we get to the final question, we want to know which character do you relate most to personally and why?
um which characters do I relate to mostly? There's a little bit of me in all three, and I know that's a throwaway answer, but
Makes sense.
Troy and kind of his like back and forth with his father. I wrote some of my experiences with my grandfather in that. My grandfather was a very hard person. Sometimes he was just seemingly like disapproving of everything. And then I had to remember, like in real life, my grandfather came from a very hard background, right? And so his idea of what a successful Black person could look like was kind of linear in a way, in terms of like you need to do this and you need to aspire to the highest of this, and so on and so forth. And how does that clash with the subsequent generation that's just like, no, I want to follow my passion, my heart, and things like that. And so writing some of the tension between sorry, not Remy, Troy and his father, was kind of reflective of real life. Um, Dominic and his constant struggle with dating and like dealing with all these different types of dudes and stuff like that. I mean, that's a little bit of everybody, right? I mean, it's me. I might have thrown a little bit of shade at I think Dominic mentions like a dude that kind of persistently wets the bed. After they hook up a couple of times. I might have dated a dude like that.
You love that?
I might have put his last name in there somewhere, but
That's great.
and the job he works at. But no, I mean the ups and downs of dating is something that I feel like we all relate to, but I was trying from some of my own experiences there. Um Remy and his like just entire like, I love Detroit. I think it could be better, but at what cost? Again, that's something I saw a lot of folks in my age group kind of deal with. So I saw a lot of myself in there as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And yeah, someone said you have it advertised on your X page, but yeah, feel free to share on Blue Sky. We're gonna run it up and we will be there to support once it comes out. Erin, my final question for you tonight is what did you learn about yourself from writing Boys Come First and through this entire process?
Um, what did I learn about myself? I think just like I used to, when the book first came out, I was so nervous. Because when you read like the more like the love scenes and stuff like that, and how like all three of them at least have one different kind of bedroom scene where they're doing all kinds of just nasty, freaky type of stuff. I was so scared because my mom was gonna read it. And and my mom like is the type of mom where it's just like every single, like she has held on to like every single little art project I made all through elementary school and that type of stuff. And every time like my name is in the newspaper, she clips it out. So of course she's gonna read this novel with a whole lot of gay sex in it, right? And a whole lot of like graphic gay sex, right? Um um I was just so nervous about, not just my mom, my dad too. And it's like my dad, oh my gosh. But getting over that, I was just like I had the confidence to kind of like put into words a lot of the Black gay experience, but make it unsanitized, right? That was something that I didn't realize I could do. Like I said, my entire career has been in journalism, and so it's been a lot of like just the facts, reporting the who, five W's and an H and all that type of stuff. To be kind of like more uninhibited and free with this sort of storytelling is the thing that I'm proud of the most. The other thing is and it truly does, touch the heart. realizing that like, I'm never gonna put myself on the same level as like a James Baldwin or anything like that. I am so far from that, and I think any writer in my position would say the same thing. But to kind of realize that there is a responsibility when it comes to storytelling around Black queerness and things like that, and to kind of see it resonate. I realized that again, one, there's more to be told, but two, that there is a duty and a responsibility of kind of, making sure our story is told right, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. And so, I was a little afraid of that. I didn't think the book was gonna go past like Detroit or the Midwest, to be honest. But to kind of see it and see people resonate with it, that's something I'm just like, okay, I know I made some small part, made some small impact. So
Okay. Absolutely awesome. All right. So that was like the last question, but someone just messaged the question. So I want to make sure that we get this last one in. They said they're curious if there's a rationale behind writing the book from the perspective of three characters separately, since you mentioned that the sequel would be a continuation of just one character.
um I think that with the three characters separately, I'm not gonna lie, I was really trying to imitate Terry McMillan. Terry McMillan wrote Waiting to Exhale. A lot of us have seen the movie. Many people have not read the book, and I'm not saying that nobody has read it. If you read the book, you know. But like, if you read Waiting to Exhale, the novel, it's just as much as the movie is told from four different perspectives. The novel is also told from four different perspectives. And so I was really trying to capture that sort of energy. Two of them are first person, two of them are third person. With Boys Come First, there's one first person, two third person. And so I was really trying to go for that. Part of that approach was because I was like, you know, if this book that's my first one only centers on one character, then that's only one story, but I want to tell more than one story, right? And so like how can I kind of include multiple perspectives, multiple experiences in one thing? And so that's why I wanted to tell it from three different perspectives. Side note, like the Detroit of it all, right? Um Detroit is very much defined by where you went to high school. And so we have neighborhood schools, magnet schools, and private schools, right? If you go to a neighborhood school, it's the school that, it's zoned to whatever house, your zip code, whatever address is zoned to the school, your neighborhood school. A magnet school is a magnet school. It's like it's not in your neighborhood, maybe it is, but like you have to take a test to get in. And then a private school is a private school. You got to pay tuition. And so um, each one of the characters had gone to a different school. Remy had gone to a neighborhood school. Troy had gone to a magnet school. Dominic had gone to a private school. So there was a little bit of that in there as well. But why I wanted to kind of focus on one was because I don't know. It's something I was trying to challenge myself as a writer in terms of like, there in one way, like Boys Come First is a full novel, in another way, it's like three short novels combined into one. And so switching to the point of view of just one character kind of gives me the challenge of how do I build a world and a universe around just one person instead of three. And so that's sort of the challenge I'm taking up for myself.
Understood. Well, I'll have to say we'll be here for whatever you decide to publish. But I do want to go back to the question I asked before this about what you learned. I want to say thank you for being courageous and, for putting yourself out there, putting this artwork out there, even in the midst of, just being kind of nervous about how it's going to be perceived. Personally, I'm in a place where I'm drawing inspiration from like other queer people that push themselves out there. For example, you as an author, there's this also this artist from Jamaica called Lexicon, and he makes like music that kind of like goes against like heteronormativity and things like that. So when I see you all out there doing things like that, it gives me inspiration of like, yeah, keep going. And, you know, there are other people who are in this with you. So want to say thank you for doing all that, but also thank you for coming here tonight. This was a very compelling conversation. I feel like we could talk for hours about this, but obviously want to be mindful of your time. But just definitely want to say thank you for taking some time out to come to speak with us tonight. We're excited about everything that is coming next for you. And, you know, you want blue sky, so we're going to be chatting it up there for sure. But Aaron, any final words?
Any final words? Just thank you all. Just thank you all for reading, for bearing with me. uh while while this thing continues to live. And like I said, I really hope to just keep telling these types of stories some way, somehow. So
All right. Well, thanks again, Aaron. And one thing, I'll speak as a person, as a founder of the We Always Got, that you do have a support system here in the We Always Got community. So thanks again.
thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.